This is TWiT.
Another thing where the next part of the Windows division is very focused is education. And this week there was a big education show in London called BET, the BET conference. So Microsoft made a whole slew of announcements at the BET conference. They introduced with some of their OEM partners some more $189, starting at $189 PCs that they're trying to get them to pit against Chromebooks. They talked about some of the new things coming to Office 365 for education around Office dictation and assistive technologies and new learning tools, immersive reader, all those kinds of things. And they had some new updates to Minecraft too, or like there's going to be a chemistry plugin kind of thing for Minecraft.
Is awesome.
It looks really awesome. Yeah, and it makes sense, right?
It's worth just calling this one out. I just think this is amazing because if you think about what Minecraft is fundamentally, is you literally mine for elements and then you use them to build things. It's create things, right? It's a very creative kind of a game. And so this does this for chemistry, for different kinds of elements, right? And the example they gave me was, that you could get hydrogen and oxygen and combine it in the right way to create water. It's when you hear this, it's like,
this is awesome. Can I download it?
I believe it's called the chemistry update, and it's coming. Well, it's coming to the education version at first.
You have to have Minecraft education.
So cool.
Yeah, it's neat. It's just really neat.
Yeah.
I want it.
So, they see students as the future creators, right? And current creators. So that next part of Windows is really, really focused on doing some big things in the education space. And I saw, Paul, you wrote a whole thing giving Microsoft an A. Giving Microsoft an A for its education efforts.
Okay, so I mentioned this earlier. Back in May, Mary Jo and I and others went to that Microsoft EDU event at which they announced Windows 10s and the Surface laptop. I rewatched that video because I wanted to reacquaint myself with what did they announce a year ago? Well, not 8 months ago, and then what has happened since, because there's been some development since. And then what did they just announce? And what does this all add up to, right? Because one of the issues for Microsoft is that they're losing the education market in the United States. And we're starting to see the impact of Chromebooks in other countries as well. New Zealand, I think the UK, and some other places in Europe. So actually, if you go back and do this, and again, I really strongly recommend doing this kind of thing. It's really interesting to look at the full breadth of what they announced, right? Windows 10s, obviously, although I don't feel like there's been a lot of uptick there, but they announced it there. Full Office is coming to the Microsoft Store. That is something that, as of the time of the article, was not available. But actually, as you'll see later today, that may literally be happening right now as we speak. Really? There's a bunch of features in Microsoft Edge that were inspired by education, including the ability to set tabs aside, because students are the type of people who do research. They have a bunch of tabs open about a particular topic. They want to put that stuff aside and then move on to the next thing, and then they can go back and find that research again. It's a cool feature. And then I think the kind of the heart of this stuff is the hitting at the Chromebook easy management and deployment functionality. They have a new app for schools called Set Up My School PCs. Wizard-driven, a teacher or an admin could do this. You make a bunch of USB keys and you walk around, and every 3 minutes you can pop one in a PC and get that thing going. And that's kind of cool. Intune for Education, which I think became generally available last summer. Bunch of hardware partners. It was basically the world's biggest PC makers except for Lenovo. But now, as of this week, Lenovo's on board. Also, you may recall the Intel Classmate PCs from a few years ago was bought by, I think it's a Japanese company, but at least it's an Asian company. New versions of those coming online this week as well. Minecraft Education Edition, which we were just talking about, which was updated this week, or will be updated soon. And then Office 365 Education, which is based on the commercial versions of Office 365. So it has Microsoft Teams and all those advanced features, but with much simpler kind of admin capabilities. Since that time, of course, Microsoft 365 has spawned an Asian version as well. And then, of course, we see the stuff that Mary Jo was alluding to this week, including some investments in STEM learning tools, lots of enhancements to Office, the apps, but also Office 365, more PC Maker partners, like I said. I mean, when you kind of add all this stuff up, And also, when you look at what Google has done recently with regards to education, because Google is actually in a pretty good position, especially here in the United States, in that they have a simple solution that appears to work pretty well for schools. It's inexpensive. The management isn't terrible. They haven't really done much. I mean, it's interesting. Microsoft, coming from behind as they are, feels the need to really be aggressive with this stuff. But when you kind of add all this stuff up from May through today, I think it's pretty impressive. And I've said this a lot about Microsoft over the past few years, because I know in the Windows community there's a lot of grousing around their strategy and if they're doing the right thing and whatever it is. But I think with regards to education, and you could say this about other things too, they've clearly done everything they can do. The uptick of this stuff, in this case in education, is not up to them. I mean, we'll see whether this convinces schools to come on board. But the trouble is that once schools go down a certain path with a certain product, it may be hard to get them back. And I think that's the issue. Right? Schools that went iPad, those are easy pickings. I don't think anyone had a good experience with iPad. The problem for Microsoft is that people have had good experiences with Chromebook. But my God, are they doing everything they can do? Yes.
Well, it's good they are, because for a while it felt like they weren't doing anything, right? Like
exactly.
I kept thinking like, okay, Chromebooks are eating your lunch in the U.S., Microsoft. They're not. They're not outside of the U.S., but in the U.S., Microsoft's Windows is really trailing Chrome OS in market share in K through 12. And I kept thinking, are they going to do something? Are they going to just like forget it, walk away from the education market? And it's nice to see them actually get very focused on it over the past couple of years, right?
It cannot be overstated how important this market is to the future of the company. This is, if you allow an entire generation of children to grow up with Google and or Apple products, then you're done. It's over. Yeah. They are not going to want or expect or demand your products if they didn't use them growing up. True. Teachers who tend to be on the older side compared to students, that is, obviously you see the value in Microsoft. No, I mean, they could be in their 20s. I mean, but they're older than the students they're teaching, obviously. Right. See the value, typically, I would think, of Microsoft's productivity offerings. But a student coming up in the world has no understanding of this stuff. And if they're never presented with it, if they're never using it in school, they're not going to understand or care that this stuff exists or that it might be better or whatever. And I think they have a compelling case with regards to functionality for sure.